Today's podcast is recorded on site at one of the most amazing facilities in the world at a huge event, and I'm talking with a good friend and extremely knowledgeable and fast driver, as well as a motorsport business owner, Brian Ghidinelli. We talk about the state of the sport, how to learn a new track, and what dancing with the pedals can do for your speed.
Welcome to the Speed Secrets Podcast. Join Ross Bentley and guests, drivers, instructors and coaches, engineers, officials, and others for conversations about high performance and race driving. Listen for tips and advice, thought-provoking ideas, and inspiration to take your own driving to the next level. Green, green, green!
Hey everyone, welcome to the show. This is different. We're at the Indianapolis Motor Speedway, and I'm here with Brian Ghidinelli, who's the founder of motorsportreg.com. Everybody, if you've been around this sport for a while, whether you're doing HPDE or track days or club racing or whatever, you know MSR, Motorsport Reg. So here with Brian, also a racer, and we're here for the SCCA Runoffs. Pretty darn cool.
This is amazing. It's my first time at the Speedway. I've been to Indy many times, but always in the winter for PRI. So to see it in all its glory with cars on the track is pretty special.
I don't know what, the first time I came here, I was just blown away by the size, the sheer, just how big this place is. What's your first impressions of coming to the Speedway?
Well, I came in the first time on a golf cart through the tunnel when they were loading in, and so the place was almost empty. And so you look around and you see these stands and you think, how could this place be full for the 500? And I hear all my friends who go, they've been going for years and years, they all cry every time it starts. And I always thought they're kind of silly, but I can see how the emotion might run high if this place is full of cheering fans and those cars are about to take the green flag.
Yeah, the only thing that's close to that for me is, I've been here for the Indy 500, and the only thing that's been close to it is the start at Le Mans. The sheer, sea of people, and at Le Mans it's them playing all the different national anthems and everybody singing and all that kind of stuff. That's pretty cool. This has got, it's got the whole other deal, the back home in Indiana, that whole thing. But are they going to do that for the runoffs?
I don't know. They've pulled out some pretty special things for the last few runoffs. They did fireworks at the end of the nighttime Spec Miata race at Daytona. They've done some other special things like that, so I wouldn't say anything's off the table.
So hopefully they've got Jim Neighbors coming to sing back home in Indiana before the first race. So
it would be impressive. Yeah. I've seen the the F1 race in Monza before too. Similar thing with the Tifosi and just the atmosphere. It's amazing.
Yeah, that'd be cool. Maybe they'll Mary Holman George will come out and say, gentlemen, start your engines. So I don't know.
I'm pretty sure this is the most racers they've ever had on the facility, so they should.
So how many registered here?
Over 1,000. They wound up, I think, at like 997 entries, so right at 1,000, and the paddock is packed.
Yeah, I was looking. Everywhere I go, last couple of days I've been here coaching, and everywhere you go, there is somebody's transporter, somebody down here in turn 1, back over in turn 2 of the oval. There's just cars everywhere. It's pretty cool, but very different. I've been here for the Grand Am IMSA events here before. I was here coaching Formula BMW with the U.S. Grand Prix when it was here. I was here the year that 6 cars started the race?
6 cars.
Yeah, when the
not
Michelin,
the best race.
No, that was not the best thing. I was there the year before that as well. So been here for a bunch of different events, and I've never seen anything like this in terms of cars everywhere. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, if there's not a fence surrounding it, there's something parked there.
Yeah. So, one of the things I'd like to talk, we'll talk about your experience at the runoffs and you racing Spec Miata and stuff like that. But before we get there, it's kind of just a general, state of the sport. Is this, obviously the runoffs here, 1,000 entries. SCCA's got to be pretty happy with that.
If they had any more, they'd be in real trouble, right? So this is the biggest runoff they've ever had. It's probably one of the few facilities that could handle 1,000 racers, and even at that, they frankly were really nervous about the entries as they just kept coming in and coming in and coming in. So looking at it from an SCCA perspective, if you don't know what Motorsport Reg is, we work with about 1,000 car clubs, racetracks, and sanctioning bodies across North America and some internationally. And the SCCA certainly has a very large racing program, as most people know. But this is the Super Bowl of amateur racing. And of all the Super Bowls of amateur racing, this is the biggest and the best that they've ever had in terms of attendance. So it certainly, from a participation perspective, looks fantastic.
I mean, is it just because it's Indy? I mean, or is there an uptick in the sport?
There's definitely an uptick for SCCA and the runoffs over the last few years. They changed the model not too long ago from being at a fixed location like Road America for 5 years to where the event now rotates around the country. So for example, in 2014, I think we'll talk about this a little bit, but that's the first time the runoffs had come to the West Coast in 45 years, something like that. So it came to Mazda Raceway, Laguna Seca, and it's been to Mid-Ohio. It's here in Indianapolis. Rumors that it's going to go to VIR next year, the year after that. So what they're trying to do from a participation perspective is make it accessible to more people. You know, because when it's in Daytona, a lot of people would like to run Daytona, but that's a 3,000-mile tow from California, and just financially, a lot of folks can't swing it. But I can tell you, in 2014, when it came to Monterey, the number of first-time runoffs participants was huge, and I'm sure that this event is some combination of first-timers because it's close to home. But for sure, the prestige of Indy and the rarity of the opportunities to run here is a huge factor.
Yeah. I'm sure there are so many people that are driving down, you know, they're driving through the tunnel and going, wow, this is it. I'm at the Speedway. This is so cool, right? So, big deal. I'm wondering, I mean, is this a good track for...
A good track for
the runoffs?
It's a great question.
I mean, the one great thing is that, you know, it does kind of... I guess, equalize some people. You know, if you get somebody who's a Mid-Ohio expert, well, you know, it's kind of got an advantage. You know, Mazda Raceway, Laguna Seca expert, you know, they've got an advantage. I know there are some people who have been here. They come to some other events, but you know, even with the layout that the SCCA has chosen here, it's a slightly different layout. So it does equalize thing, and I think that's one of the great things about this circuit, using this. So
I agree. I mean, short of a rain race, there's probably no other place in the country they can go that would have the same kind of effect. You know, there's been some MX5 Cup races here, there's IMSA races here, but in this paddock, you know, a small handful of folks run those. But by and large, most people have never been here until the test days they're going on now, or I think there's a PCA event here once a year, something like that, but pretty rare. So I don't think there's any place else in the country that would have a better equalizing opportunity.
So what they need to do is have it at a street race, Long Beach. Long Beach runoffs, how would that be? So
there's like 105 Spec Miatas entered, of which they're going to have to do like last chance qualifiers and things like that to get in. Imagine 105 Spec Miatas running the walls of Long Beach. I think that would be a great race.
Oh, yeah. I think they'd be moving some walls. Yeah. Your experience at the runoffs 3 years ago. Talk about that.
So I did the runoffs for the first time in 2011 at Road America. That was my first time doing a kind of national competition for SCCA. We towed out and did the June sprints in that year, and then we came back and did the runoffs. Had a great year, learned a ton, you know, racing with people from all across the country, and kind of took a year and a half off from a combination of being busy with work and other things. And then in 2014, we decided we'd give it another shot because it was coming to California. So we just knew that we had, first of all, home track advantage, and you know, travel costs and budget and things like that are lower. So it was, I mean, we can get into the results of the race, but I would just say, as an experience, it was a phenomenal experience. I had a great week, a great race. At least all the on-track competition was great, and you know, whether you want to go and chase national championships, which is something that I want to do, or you just want to go and run a big prestigious event, the atmosphere at an event like the runoffs is not like your local race, you know, no matter what you do. And I think for that reason, it's something that everybody should try to do at some point.
Yeah, there's something about, you know, you can talk about the one downside of the runoffs in some ways is the fact that it's spread out over such a long period of time. That's a big time commitment for a lot of people. But on the flip side of that is, it's such a great, you know, it's like a big family camp out for 10 days, right?
Yeah, you know, it probably depends on who you are a little bit. For me, because I travel around the country a bit and I work with folks from all corners of the country, when I come to an event like this, I know tons of people. And I mean, so that makes me a little bit unusual in the fact that, you know, there's people from Florida, from the Northeast, from the West Coast, et cetera, and I run into these folks all over the place. So it is definitely like a little bit of a family homecoming when you come here. But I think even if you haven't seen them face to face, like maybe you're on a forum or you see these other people on Facebook that you become friends with, and so to see the people face to face, and if nothing else, to either share the track with or watch the names that you hear about, it's pretty cool. It's unusual, and I think that's one of the things. Like, sometimes you can kind of think, it's another club race weekend, and it's of course fun, or should be fun, but it is something bigger. It's something, and I would say better and special. And so yes, it's a huge amount of time commitment as well as financial commitment, but for anyone that can swing it, like, it's worth doing at least once.
Yeah. Actually, yesterday I'm sitting out in watching the driver that I'm coaching, and I get the tap on the shoulder, and the guy goes, "Hi, I'm Don Knowles, and I like what you're doing." And I'm like, I've known Don Knowles, I've known of him, but isn't a guy that I never had a chance to connect with. And I'm like, that is cool. I get to meet Don Knowles. Like, I think he's, in this world, I think he's a great guy, and he's written a bunch of stuff, and so you're right. I mean, it's a cool event to kind of connect with people as well.
I think of the 25 Hours of Thunder Hill like that. I think of the 24 Hours of Daytona. I was there as a spectator, hopefully a driver someday. But you go to these events where, it pulls people from all over the place, and so you just run into people from lots of walks of life. I kind of think of it as, sometimes you go someplace and you see somebody and you're like, do I know them from high school or college or work? You can't quite place them. And this is a little bit similar. Like, people come in from all over because of the prestige and the competition level.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the, you're talking about Daytona. Every year you go there in January, you go there for the roar before the 24, the test. And, what's cool about that event is, it's just after the holidays. And everyone's like, hey, Happy New Year. And
in a good mood.
Yeah. I mean, it's kind of a cool way to kind of start the year that way. So maybe this is, kind of the opposite of, how's the season been, where you been?
Winding down a little bit.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
yep.
Yeah.
Although I don't think they're ready to wind down just yet. They're still, maybe next Sunday.
Yeah. So, and I should clarify, we're sitting here on the Saturday prior to the start of when qualifying starts on Monday, correct?
Correct.
Yeah.
So we're here during test days.
Yeah. And so by the time you listen to this, the runners will be over. We'll be old news, Brian.
Someone will have won.
Yeah. Someone. I'm going to predict that someone will win. Yeah. Every class, actually.
Probably.
Yeah. So that's when we're doing this. But talking about just kind of the state of the sport. Because MSR doesn't just do club stuff, right? Club racing. I got to think a big chunk of the business that comes through MSR is car club events, HPDE. I know, like the Tire Rack Street Survival program. I hear so many groups talking about the sport seems to be growing, and then every now and then I talk to somebody that's going, oh boy, it's really tough to get new people into the sport. And it's something I've talked about on this podcast in the past, and you see the numbers, right? What's growing, what's not growing?
Yeah, good question. So we see a fraction of the numbers, a portion of the numbers, right? But enough to be sort of statistically significant.
Yeah.
So we work with about 1,000 organizations, and they do lots of different things. It is everything from the Street Survival Foundation, which is car control clinics for teens in parking lots, to autocross, to track days, both motorcycles and cars. We have lots of go-kart customers like Superkarts USA, which runs, if this is the Super Bowl of amateur racing for cars, the SCCA Supernats in Vegas every year is the Super Bowl of go-karting in North America.
Yeah.
Michael Schumacher has won that race.
Incredible event.
Yeah. It's in a parking lot in Las Vegas. It's like nothing you've ever seen. It's really amazing.
Yeah.
So a wide gamut of stuff, right? For sure we see both, let's call them disciplines that are growing. We also see organizations that are growing. And I think what differentiates the thing is not so much like, is the sport as a whole growing or shrinking, something like that. But what you find is that certain individuals and certain organizers are better at acquiring and retaining customers. We think of them as customers. The attendees for your events, you're selling them something of value. It's not just the track time, it's the overall experience. And so some organizers do a great job of outreach and retention and building a following. Just like some companies do a better job of that than other ones, right? So when we look at things that are going well, from a philosophy perspective, the casual events like track days are going great because the barriers to participation are low, whereas the more time in particular that someone has to invest to participate, those things are, not that they're doing poorly, but they aren't growing at the same rate. So when you think about the runoffs, this is a great example. The budget required to prepare for it, to qualify for it, and to come here for 10 to 12 days to do it is substantial. Whereas the average guy or girl who goes to a track day can buy basically just a helmet. They get the car tech, and for $250 gets, in some ways, 60 to 70% of the benefit. And they go back to the office on Monday and they say, hey, I went racing this weekend.
Right.
So in some ways, there's so much value in these casual participation things. And I think we see, when I look at not just our sport, but let's say sport in general, the casual participation is really key, because like one of the examples I give is many years ago we sort of lament that motorsport is not the only game in town anymore, when it was the most popular thing, because there was football, baseball, motorsport, and that's what dominated the ABC wild world of sports, right? Well, that was in a time when, sort of from a media perspective, it was like slow to find out about new things. So if some new sport came along, like say mountain biking, it evolved in Marin, Northern California, where I'm from. But it took a long time for people to learn about it and for the equipment to propagate and for new people to get involved before it became this really big deal where eventually it becomes part of the Olympics and they have the World Championship, all this stuff, right? Well, fast forward now in a post-internet era, and somebody invents wingsuit flying, and overnight the whole world knows about it, right? I mean, they came up with a catchy video, had a good soundtrack, and suddenly everyone's like, wingsuit flying is a thing. And so when I look at the sport and I talk about those organizations or organizers who are succeeding or not succeeding as much, so much of that is about sort of competing in this more modern landscape of marketing and promotion. And one of the things we talk to our organizers about is like, your biggest asset that you can build is your email list, because those are the people to whom you can communicate and promote your events and do these things. And sort of the number of people on your list multiplied by the number of emails you send is in some way the mathematical equation for how many people show up to your event. It won't cure if you've got a bad date at a bad track, but fundamentally, the more people you can reach, the more often you can reach them, the more likely they are to come do something with you. And so I think, from a holistic perspective of the sport, it's the people that understand that sort of modern take on reaching people and getting people to take action. They're the ones that are doing great. And I'll give you a couple examples. In the track day realm, we've got Speed SF on the West Coast, and there's the SCDA on the East Coast. Those are both programs that have seen huge gains since they switched to our platform, because they can send more email, they can track what the people are doing better, they can target the emails more accurately. And like, those may seem like no-brainers, and they kind of are, but it's the people who actually do them. I think you say something like, the best racers are the ones that do the fundamentals the best. And the same thing is true with marketing, the same thing is true with promotion, etc.
Yeah. And it's interesting how, because I travel around and go to car club and do these talks a lot, and I talk to some clubs and they're like, it's just getting so difficult to get people involved. And other groups are like, man, we got more participation than ever. And I think it's that. And I think you mentioned to me one time about there are growers and there are maintainers. And it seems like there are some organizations that are just pretty happy to maintain what they've been doing for years. And there are some that are constantly looking for new ways to do stuff. And, the email list and that kind of stuff, makes a big difference, right?
Yeah. We do talk about it in terms of growers and maintainers, and it's a mental state of mind, which is, are you really focused on just keeping the events sort of logistically running, or are you thinking about how do you get the next person in the door? Because, there's a lifetime to this sport like anything. Some people churn out after a year or two, some people become lifers, but you want to always be putting in more people into your funnel, if you will, so there's somebody new to follow up when somebody doesn't come back. In my opinion, until you've got a wait list 10 people deep for every run group you offer, you don't have enough people.
Right. Actually, that's interesting. Just a couple weeks ago, I get a statement once a year from my publisher of my books. And I look at it and going, over 135,000 copies of my Speed Secrets books have been bought through the years. And you go, wow, it's 135,000. No, it's not. I don't know what it is. Like it may be some small number, but those people they come into the sport, they buy a book, they hang around for a couple of years, and they go away. And now they're buying a golf book or a sailing book or something like that. So,
and that's what we compete with. Yeah. I mean, when we talk about competition, so many of our customers think of our other customers as their competition. But I really believe in this rising tide lifts all boats philosophy, which is, if we stop trying to eat a percentage or two of each other's pie, and we thought about, it's not the percentage that we have today, it's the percentage we don't have as participants in the sport. If we worked a little bit more collaboratively on finding those people and worrying a little bit less about exactly who they participated with, I think we'd be in a much better place. I mean, there are millions and millions and millions of Americans or North Americans who do not go to the track.
Right.
And yet who drive a car every day.
Yeah.
Right? Like, they're all potential customers. Maybe not, they're not all going to be club racers. But look, you got to have a lot of people doing car control clinics and track days in order to find the people who are going to become really passionate about it and ultimately become the diehard track day people, and then ultimately become club racers and pro racers and everything else down the line.
Right. You know, it's interesting when I was involved with the startup of Dirtfish Rally School, and, you know, we talked to, you know, our fellow workers and people that were involved with that business, and, you know, we talk about the competition, and they go, well, competition, you know, that's the Bondurant School and Skip Barber and Tim O'Neill Rally School and stuff like that. And I'm going, no. It's people that go skydiving. It's people that go golfing. It's people that go sailing. It's like, you know, like you said, if we spent more time focusing on, let's drag people from those other sports and get them into our sport, and we all win, right?
Yeah, I think if you look, like, the 24 Hours of Lemons is a good example of this, where the people who are doing the 24 Hours of Lemons, you know, the requirements to do it are pretty low. Mm-hmm. It's collaborative in the sense that it's team-based, so you don't have to have all the equipment or all the knowledge to participate. You can sort of join a team for a weekend and have some fun. And that is definitely building people that are migrating other places. Right? They're migrating to become more serious because they find that this is a hobby they're really passionate about. And on the flip side, one of the things that Lemons and Chump Car and other series do really well is that it's a low-pressure, fun-oriented environment. And so you're also seeing people who are migrating away from more serious club racing into this more casual version of racing, right? Like, the prep is lower, the cost is lower, you can bring your friends along, they don't have to have all racing licenses, things like that. So, like, going back to the notion of the overall size of the pie, the idea that you can keep a customer with your product or service by not letting them know about one that's a better fit for them, like, is not really how the world works, let alone the business world or the motorsport world, right? So if some people are going to be lifelong Lemons racers because that's the right fit for them, that's fantastic. And, you know, some of them are going to migrate other places and vice versa. It's really about the total size of that pie, making it as big as possible.
You know, something that I've kind of noticed and I've been thinking about a lot lately is how many people are involved with the sport who, I guess, their approach to the sport is very different than their approach to everything else they do in their life. And, you know, and I don't know if it's just because, well, this is my hobby, but, you know, if they approach the sport, their involvement with the sport, the same way they approach their career, you know, their business, if they're a business owner or something like that, if they approach it the exact same way, wow, just think what would happen. And I think, you know, but maybe the flip side of that is you know what? I don't want to approach.
I don't want a second job.
Yeah, I mean, this is my hobby, I guess. So maybe that's part of it too. But,
you know, some people can't help themselves but push, right? And you look at racers, like, certainly that's a component of being a racer. It's like never being satisfied. There's always more, I think is one thing you say, right? And yeah, other people are like, I want to go play golf for the day effectively. I just want to go relax for the day. I don't care if I'm going as fast as I can. I don't care if I'm getting the most out of my car, my motorcycle, whatever it is. And that's totally fine too. I mean, I think that's, again, about where having lots of organizations is not necessarily a bad thing. It means that there's different kinds of offerings for different kinds of people.
Yeah. You know, I've said it many times. I mean, one of the great things about this sport is there's something for everybody.
Definitely.
You know, whether it's Lemons or pro racing or autocross or rally or whatever. I mean, there's something for everybody, and you know, it doesn't matter. You know, the biggest thing I think is do something to collect somebody and bring them into this sport.
Yeah, and, you know, going back to the competition thing, we like, when we did a survey a few years ago and we kind of identified what are we really competing with, like, why are you not participating more than you are today? We asked a couple things. One, are you going to participate more or less next year? About the same was one question. And then if it's more or less, what are the reasons why? And there was some multiple choice options and then also a write-in option. And fundamentally what it comes down to is time, money, and other interests. Mm-hmm. Time and money, we can't do a whole lot about. But how we stack up compared to other interests is directly tied to what the experience is like.
Yeah.
And so, you know, other interests are things like golf. It's like kids sports. It's family vacations. It's all this stuff. You know, I was on the SCCA San Francisco Region Board of Directors for 4 years. It was a few years ago. And one of the longtime members of the club and an old racer was sort of telling us a story about how they used to only have single regionals, right? So you tow for an entire weekend and you get one race, not two like is common today. And the schedule had like 19 events, and only if you were in the top 5 did you get invited to this Pacific Coast Road Racing Championship shootout, so like a runoffs for the West Coast.
Yeah.
And I just thought, and the whole family got in the motorhome. This was the family's activity. As a family, they went to the racetrack 19 times a year, I guess 20 when you count the championship, and that's what they did. I don't know who you could get to sign up for that kind of thing today.
Right.
Like, there's not enough value in that experience, and you're at the expense of too many alternatives that people also want to do.
I think that's the biggest problem is we have so many choices. We have so many options of other things to do now. Everything's become, I'm not going to say it's easier or anything like that, but it's more available, it seems like.
Well, with Facebook and everything else, you know what you're missing out on, right? FOMO is the fear of missing out, and
yes.
people, it's a like, you can't help but see all the great times that other people are having. So you're always like, well, I don't really want to commit to that thing because something better could come along.
Right.
And so instead of lamenting that, I mean, it's worth lamenting, but we also need to adapt and accept that that's the case, right? So how do we thrive in that world rather than just complain about the good old days being the good old days?
That's why we have remote controls for the TV, right?
Yeah.
To see what else is on.
Yeah, exactly.
Not to see what's on, but to see what else is on.
Just keep the guide permanently up at the bottom.
Right.
There could be something better.
Yeah. And guess what? There is always, well, actually, no, there is nothing worthwhile on TV, in my opinion. So let's see, because cars whizzing by here, it's kind of fun. Spec Miata. I mean, that's about as competitive as it gets. Actually, it looks like Spec Racer Ford are out there right now. That's probably just as competitive. But Spec Miata, if you were coming here for the runoffs, what would your approach be? How would you approach it? What would you do, I guess? And what's worked for you in the past? One of the things I love about doing this podcast is, I love it when somebody can go away going, that was interesting what they talked about, but I'm going to go and use that. Mm-hmm. So what's your, what is somebody going to listen to this going to go, oh, I'm going to go use that?
Yeah, well, I think like we talked about, since nobody's really been to this track for this weekend or week, for sure learning fast is a key part of that, right? So everyone's basically coming in green, and they need to figure out how to get up to speed quickly. So earlier this year, I went to New Jersey Motorsports Park for the first time, and I ran a SCCA Enduro there, a 12-hour Enduro. So I'd never been to the track, and while everybody else had, my preparation for this event would be more or less the same. So I started off with a handful of things. Typically for me, I'm an analytical driver. I'm a software developer, mechanical engineering school, those kinds of things. So I'm definitely data. I like to analyze. I like to come prepared and so forth. So for me, what I typically start off with is some in-car video from someone that I know is relatively fast. So I don't just go to YouTube and search, but instead what I do is I went to New Jersey Motorsports Park, and I know some of the Spec Miata guys that I've raced against at the runoffs, and I found some of their videos on YouTube, so I knew that they were competent, if you will. So I start off with that to kind of get a gist of which way the track goes, so I feel comfortable about the general layout of the track. If it's available, I use iRacing then typically to actually run some laps. So I'll try to watch enough video to where in my mind with my eyes closed, I can remember the lefts and the rights more or less, and is it a 90 degree, is it a short, whatever the features are. So I'll start with that, then I'll start running laps in iRacing. The interesting thing about New Jersey is that in iRacing, it's a tech track, which means it's not fully complete. So the surface and the physics are good, but the off-track things like trees and some of the fences and signs are like wireframes. So they're not quite lifelike, if you will.
Right.
But by running my own laps and using the video, I start with the track map and start making notes as though I had been at the track. So I'll give a shout out to 2 Spec Miata guys who are here, at least one of them's here this week. Tyler Casera, who is a fast guy from the New Jersey area, and then Elvan Goulart, who's actually the one that runs SCDA in the Northeast, the track days. I looked at their in-car video, and I could start picking up some reference points in the distance. Like, okay, here's kind of where they're apexing in terms of reference on the curbing. Here's kind of where they're turning in. Here's kind of where they're pointing at the signs in the distance when they're apexing to get some visual sightlines, basically. And then I went back to iRacing and started practicing and refining those things. So sometimes what I think looks like the line in their in-car video turns out to not quite be right in iRacing, and I can then refine it. So
which one do you trust the most?
I trust the iRacing.
Why?
Well, because what's hard to tell from watching somebody else's in-car video is like where do their inputs start making the adjustments to the car's attitude or position that's actually relative to the things I'm looking at in the distance? You know, if there's a billboard in the far distance, it's kind of hard to say, like, is the nose really pointed there right now, or is it kind of rotating? So I think I found iRacing to sort of refine, if you will, my notes from watching the in-car video.
So yeah, and I think that's a great point, because a lot of times, you know, I'll look at a video and go, that doesn't quite look right, and then I'll watch a car from the outside, or I'll go and drive, and it's like, it looks different.
Yeah.
And yet, it is the same thing, or it's what looks like where somebody's turning in a video is not what it really is.
Yeah.
So I think it's a really good point. Is just watching a video, you can sometimes get inaccurate information.
It's a whole lot better than nothing, but it's not
hugely.
the real thing either, right?
Yeah.
So it's all about refining. You know, you've got this concept that we used at Mazda Raceway a few years ago of the $100,000 track map.
Yeah.
And I have a track map at Laguna that, I mean, I can drop in there and run a fast lap anytime, because that track map has so many notes on it. It's got every reference point. You know, I can tell you the number of counts coming into turn 3 at Laguna. I can tell you the number of counts, like 1,001s, between the time that I see the orange on the wall, track right, come up behind the worker station until I need to turn in. Anyway, it's not the only reference point I have, but it's like, if I can't see, if I've got cars all around me or something, I need another reference point, it's a 1,001 and then turn.
See, to me, the cool part about that is that a lot of people will take a track map and they'll write down the visual reference points. You're talking about the mental reference points. Right?
Yeah, I mean, in my head, I count sometimes. You know, 1,001. Okay, now we go.
Yeah.
So I'll use visual. I'll use the feel. You know, like in my Laguna track map, a lot of it is the sound that the various curbs make. So the interior curb turn 3, which is a decreasing radius right, is a tall gator. So it's, you know, bop, 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 bop. But when you get to the exit, it's the really finely gradated, and so it's wah as you come on and off it. And so in my mind, when I'm doing visualization for that track, like, I make those noises. Or I hear those noises. Maybe I'm not making them, right? But, you know, another thing we used at Laguna was to take my fastest lap I'd ever turned previous to the runoffs, and for my visualization exercises, I pulled just the audio from that and put it into a loop. So I took my very fastest lap, I made an audio loop of 5 laps, so basically 5 back-to-back flyers, and then would use that as my soundtrack for my visualization every night before the runoffs. So I'd run typically sets of 5 or maybe 15 laps as I was getting closer to the event to just be on point. And they were always perfect flyers because I was using this audio track, right? So you could do it entirely in your mind, but what I found for me at least is the audio helped me pace, especially the straights.
Yeah.
Because Laguna's kind of turn straight. So it helped me pace the straights to make sure I was arriving in the next corner at the right time.
Especially in a Spec Miata.
It takes a while.
It takes a little while to get down that straightaway.
That's why we have our coffee machines in there.
Right. But I mean, that's hugely valuable secret right there is just recording that audio and playing it back at the same time, right? And
it doesn't have to be your audio either. I mean, if you're trying to find pace or you haven't been there before, you could rip the audio from somebody you see on YouTube. Again, if you know that they're reasonably...
Yeah, because one thing I've learned is that everything on YouTube is not perfect or real or accurate or, yeah.
So, I mean, going back to New Jersey, the in-car video, making a first pass on a track map, the iRacing to refine that track map. Then I got there and I got one 30-minute session on the test day. And, you know, because it's an Enduro, they didn't want to run the car much. It was a Spec 46 BMW, so we didn't want to run the car much. So I got like 30 minutes in the car, kind of around twilight, refined my map yet again, and then I got one stint in the car, 1 3-hour stint in the car. So, you know, my opportunities for the in-person refinement were very, very minor. I mean, of course, during my stint, I'm making mental adjustments and improvements,
right.
But I'm not able to go back and put that on my map yet, obviously, right? Plus, I ran in the rain for most of the time, so it turned out to be not all that useful. I mean, super useful, but that is a rain set of info as opposed to my dry set of info that I used for early in the stint and on the test day.
And, you know, I mean, I've talked about it before here, is not enough drivers make those track maps. It is so powerful when you write a note down on a track map, and the best track maps I see are, it's completely covered, and sometimes somebody's flipped it over and they're writing notes on the back of it. I mean, that's...
My New Jersey track map, the one that I took with me there before I ever got in the car, I think was version 8.
Really?
So I started with version 1, which has, you know, a handful of notes, but I'm doing the handwritten notes on a physical printed piece of paper. And then as I get into iRacing, I run some sessions. Any simulator is fine, but I happen to have iRacing in it, and they have it for that track. Every time I'm refining it, like I'm running out of room, or maybe what I wrote in the previous version, I've now got a better version of, either more succinct or a different reference point or something else. So I'm going version by version by version, and I think by the time I got to the track, I had 6 in hand, and then when I left the track, I had like 9 really, because I wound up with 1 set for dry and 1 set for rain.
You selling those? I'm sure there's some people are going, oh, I'd like to see your notes.
Well, so this weekend, you and I were supposed to be racing at Mid-Ohio with our friend Ryan Stomp. And minus a malfunction of the engine that left some oil in the ground, it sounds like, my preparation for that was basically just like New Jersey. But the other asset that I had for that was one of your virtual track walks that you and Peter Krause do. And, I was watching it, and it's like 2.5 hours long, and you're kind of like, well, man, that's a long time. And it's like, it took...
Boy, those guys bore... Yeah,
it took like an hour and 15 minutes to get past turn 2, I think. And I'm like, man, like this is the level of detail that I want to put into a track map, and it's in the audio. So, if that was available, I don't know if you have one for New Jersey or not.
Not yet.
I don't think so, right? So that was part of my prep for the Mid-Ohio this weekend, along with the iRacing, along with some in-car. And, I'm not a pro racer, but I want to be the very best I can be every time I get in a car, whether that's endurance race like the 25 hours that I've won, or we go to the runoffs and it's a sprint race, or if it's a track day. I always want to perform my own personal best, whatever that is. And so I'm going to do as much prep as possible, because when I get in one of those cars, I don't want everyone to be like, oh, he's only a couple seconds off the pace, that's not too bad. I want to be, if I'm a 10th off, I'll be like, okay, I did my homework. I don't want to be, I want to be right there.
Yeah. Okay. So you want to be the guy that people go, man, he's never been here before, and it's like 10th lap, he's already on the pace, and yeah.
I did set the fast lap time in the car at New Jersey, and I think much to the chagrin of my awesome teammates, but I think they're kind of like, hey, wait a second.
Yeah. You didn't tell them that you're always faster driving somebody else's car?
I'm not really, but it worked out. It worked out well that weekend.
Yeah. So you mentioned the virtual track walks that Peter and I do, and we're sitting here in Indy, and you talked about this is a bucket list track, right?
Oh, yeah. Who doesn't want to cross the bricks, right?
Right. So I got to ask, though, so we've had twice as many people buy the virtual track walk for Watkins Glen than any other track in the country. And, we're talking Road Atlanta, VIR, Lime Rock, Mid-Ohio, Mazda Raceway, Laguna Seca, Coda. I mean, these are not tracks that are not bucket list tracks. I'm still sitting here kind of going, why do more people want Watkins Glen virtual track walks than any other one?
Well, one thing I can say is Watkins Glen is in a densely populated part of the country, right? Accessible to lots of people. So part of it might just be
more than Lime Rock.
Well, I've never been to either track, but I'm just thinking, like, there's a lot of large events at the Glen.
Yeah.
And Lime Rock is really short, right?
Yeah.
Distance-wise? Okay,
Yeah.
So more cars fit on the Glen is one way to think about it. So more people are going.
Okay.
So it might just be a combination of, that and maybe the fact that the Glen's more complicated. I mean, Lime Rock, my understanding, is not the most difficult track in the world. It's got some tricky bits, but,
There's not a lot to it, but what there is as tricky as anything else, and I think that's why people love Lime Rock. So anyway, yeah.
So maybe the Glen is. Yeah. I mean, the Glen's got the Armco, and maybe it's more intimidating. I don't know.
That's it. Maybe they want to stay off the blue fences.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just interesting as you were talking about that. I was just kind of thinking about that. So, going back to you and the runoffs and the Spec Miata, you're really, really good with your left foot. In fact, you've shared a video on YouTube of you coming into turn 11 at Laguna, of you switching from right foot to left foot to trailing into the corner. And where did you develop that skill? Because
is it a skill?
Absolutely. Because I mean, the first time you talked to me about it, because I was there with you and you were talking to me about it, I'm kind of like, really? Is that the best way? Because one of the things I always tell people, a mediocre left foot braker is going to be slower than a good right foot braker.
For sure.
And there's a lot of good right foot brakers who are mediocre only at left foot.
For sure.
And, so sometimes I'm a little... Skeptical.
Yeah.
I'm a little skeptical to somebody saying, well, I left foot brake, and I'm going, really? But you do it so well. Did you practice that on the street, on the track? I mean, is it just, where'd that come from?
Yeah, so I do some classroom instruction sometimes for the BMW Club, Golden Gate chapter in the Bay Area, and usually the advanced classroom, and this topic comes up from time to time, and people are like, well, maybe I should start left foot braking, and I always say, the wrong place to start left foot braking is on the track. Right? Like, you need to start left foot braking at home or on the street first, or pick one corner. And kind of the interesting thing, I guess, about Mazda Raceway is that that's the track where I first ever left foot braked in a race car. And I had an old E30 M3, this is like 2003 or so. I did like half a season of BMW CCA Club racing, and I decided that this was a skill I wanted to learn. And so I picked 2 corners, I think. And I just started left foot braking for those 2 corners. And they were corners with like low consequences. So if you got it wrong, not a big deal. So initially, I was just learning to left foot brake like sort of anybody would, but I also, when I started going Spec Miata racing, I bought a truck and a trailer and the whole downward spiral.
Yeah.
And so I now had an automatic truck. And so for sure, now on the street, the interesting thing is, if I have a panic stop situation, I left foot brake so much on the street that my left foot goes to the brake instead of my right foot. So it's become instinct. But, I didn't grow up racing. I have no go-karting background or anything like that. It's just intentional practice where it's available. And I don't drive a lot because Motorsport Reg is a remote company, so we all work from home actually. But when I do drive, I only use my left foot brake on the street, and then progressively use that more and more on the track until I could left foot brake in corners where no downshifting was required. Mm-hmm. So I could confidently and reliably use the left foot to do the speed adjustment. And then eventually started practicing entering turn 14 at Thunder Hill, which is down the back straight. It's a tight corner. Started working on this left-right, left dance, where basically flat on the gas, come in the brake zone, put the left foot over the brake, and then left foot brake at full threshold, move the right foot over onto the brake pedal to take over for the left foot, and now start to heel and toe. The left foot goes to the clutch, downshift, and then bring the left foot back onto the brake to do the sort of, not the first, let's say the first third of the corner entry where you still want to trail brake a little bit into the corner or have a little bit of pressure on the nose. So flat on the gas, left foot brake all the way, right foot takes over, heel toe downshift, and for me, I've worked to now only shifting once. I don't roll through the gears anymore. I decided to focus just on the braking, the threshold braking, and then shift once, so a 5-2 for example, and then move the left foot back onto the brake pedal and resume the transition between the straight line braking and the turn-in, and then pick up the gas with the right foot.
And it's magic. The video, I'm going to put a link to that video in the show notes here, because I highly recommend that you go and watch this thing, because it's really cool to watch.
It's fun. It's like dancing. It's fun.
Yeah, and it's kind of like an extra little challenge, but you do it so well, and that's it's not something. I don't know if you were born knowing how to do that.
Definitely not.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think your question about is it a skill? Is it better to do that than right foot braking, for example? I look at the data all the time, and the first time I ever did that, I was pretty crappy at it.
Yeah.
So I had to do it a bunch before I could really make a fair determination between does this actually work better? Is it an advantage or not? And I will say now I think it's an advantage. It wasn't initially.
Right.
But a lot of times I'll have like a DE student or something, or be talking to a fellow racer, and they'll say something like, I went through turn 5 and I tried this other line and it just didn't work. It's like, well, the first time you try it, you might consider that you didn't do it as well as the 500 times you've done the other line. Like, maybe try it a few more times, right, before you make a decision.
I stress that over and over and over again, is that, just because it doesn't work once or twice doesn't mean it's not going to work. Sometimes it doesn't work because you just haven't figured out how to make it work yet. And you got to try. You got to change some other things. You try. You move your brake zone in. Well, it changes where you get back to throttle. Well, can you get back to throttle as early still using the late braking? So it's trying to figure out how to make all that work. So.
We were looking at some in-car video the other day here, right? And we were looking at this corner that opens up onto the back straight, and the track is a certain width on the entry, and it's that width plus 50% on the exit. And so what seems like a corner you can only go so fast through, we're like, well, maybe you could go a lot faster because there's both more track at the exit, and could you actually run your 2 tires over the inside curb? Like, is the curb tall enough that it'll, two-wheel the car, or will you be loaded enough that you can kind of go over it? I mean, can you open up that radius another 3 feet? So, like, just because you tried it once with full throttle from the entry, well, what about full throttle from the entry and an extra 3 feet of apex radius?
Yeah. It gets back to figure out a way to make it work. Yeah.
And that's rare to get figured out on the first try.
Yeah. And I guess that applies to whether you're driving or you're trying to figure out how to get more participants in your event.
Well, yeah, for sure. I mean, if anybody had the perfect email marketing campaign, for example, on their first try, like, they shouldn't be doing it for a car club. They should be working at some big company.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So let's wrap it up and go watch some more cars here. And so Brian, thanks for being on the show. And hey, it's easy to find you, motorsportreg.com, right? Anything else?
That's right. Motorsport Reg, if you are looking for any kind of event that's in your area, you should go there and take a look at our calendar. You can also sign up for an email that will send you a list of those events once a month, so you never miss anything. And if you're a racer or a race organization, we also make a live timing app called Race Hero, which is in the Apple and Android app stores. It works with the MyLap system, and it gives you live timing, official results, entry lists, and schedules. So that's another thing that we work on that we're really proud of. But yeah, we love hearing from you. I'm on Twitter, just my last name, Ghidinelli, or on Facebook. I love connecting with people because I'm all around the country all the time. So definitely reach out and say hi.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, let's go watch some more cars and have some fun.
Vroom, vroom.
Okay, thanks, Brian.
Bye.
I'm going to follow up on what Brian and I spoke about regarding left foot braking with this week's Speed Secret. A good right foot braker will be faster than a mediocre left foot braker. Yeah, I can't tell you the number of drivers who talk to me about learning to left foot brake, the pros and cons of doing so, and how to learn to be good at it. If you're learning to left foot brake because you want to add a new challenge to your driving experience, go for it. But if you're looking for it to give you an advantage, take a good, long, hard look at whether it's worth it. Your right foot is so well trained from all the experience you have working the gas pedal, and usually the brake pedal too. You've developed the fine motor skills with your right foot, the ones that your left foot may not have yet. Yes, you can develop them, but it takes a lot of practice. If you don't have the time and place to really focus on building the skills with your left foot, you'll likely end up being a mediocre left foot braker, one outdriven by a good right foot braker. This podcast is a great learning experience for me, and I hope it is for you too. I get to connect with and have conversations with some really cool and knowledgeable people, amazing people that I may not be able to connect with if not for this podcast. My hope is that I'm sharing that experience with you, providing value to you. With that in mind, if you know of an amazing person who would be interesting to hear have a conversation with me, please introduce him or her to me. That would be really cool. My email address is ross@speedsecrets.com, so go ahead and introduce us. As always, thanks for listening, and I'll talk to you next week. Until then, keep learning and having fun.